Hey, everyone, and welcome to your favorite cybersecurity podcast. I mean, it's our favorite cybersecurity podcast as well, Not Another Demo. And we know you love Not Another Demo because we promise you no PowerPoint slides, no acronyms, no marketing jargon, just a real, honest conversation with a vendor about what they do for their customers. And I have with me the one and only Mr. Aaron Bragg today. We're minus Anthony today, so that's all right. We'll carry on. And big news: this is episode 50 of Not Another Demo. We made it all the way to the big 50. We should have balloons and confetti and maybe some Advil or whatever people have when they turn 50. Yeah. Anyways, we are very excited for our big 50th anniversary. Maybe I can, in post-production, add some fireworks or something, or a walker or something, now that we've reached this age. But we are excited to have with us for this 50th episode the founder and CEO of Lima Charlie, Maxime. And Maxime, first of all, thank you for being on the podcast. We love having founders on. It's just always a great conversation, because the first question that I love to ask a founder is, when you were thinking of starting a company and you were looking out at the security market, or you were looking out at the technology space, what was it that you saw that was missing, that you could either create or do better? So please introduce yourself to the audience, and then tell us a little bit about the origin story of Lima Charlie.
Sure, sounds good. So yeah, like super brief intro on myself. I started in security around 2007. I'm Canadian, so I worked for Canadian intelligence for several years, SIGINT side of the house, then defensive. Eventually went and made my way to like early CrowdStrike, and then went to Google internal security. And then I heard about this cool new thing in Google X that was getting started, which became Chronicle Security. So I was part of founding team there. And that kind of brought us to about 2018-ish, when I decided to go and start and do something. I always wanted to go and start a company. Like, if you start a company, you kind of have to have that seed as a baseline. And the other part of that is, I've been in security since 2007. Some people have been there for longer than I have, but it's still a decent amount of time. And looking at the industry, I could see that not a whole lot had really changed. I feel like, we kind of gotten marginally better. There's a ton of vendors in cybersecurity that do really good products. But it just felt like, all kind of like inching along, and nothing fundamentally had changed. And that's just not my personality. I didn't want to go and say like, hey, I'm going to start an EDR and it's like 10% better than the other guy. And it's like, not my thing. So the thing that I kind of realized was that there had been a huge revolution in IT in my lifetime, like around 2005 to 2010 kind of thing. And that revolution was the cloud provider. You kind of used to have to go and buy the box software and like negotiate with IBM, over 6 months for a 5-year contract, and like, all that painful stuff. And then people at some point, I'd kind of realized that worked in IT had kind of gotten to the point where they're like, look, I want a VM. I don't care what vendor it is. I know what the VM is. You know what a VM is. It doesn't have to come from this vendor that has, this magic secret sauce. I just want the damn thing. And AWS kind of came in, right, and said like, look, here's what we're going to do. Everything we're going to offer it like self-service, multi-tenant, scale up, scale down, build per usage, OEM friendly, right? Like AWS. If you start a company with AWS, you don't have to put the AWS sticker in your product. They don't care. And that had fundamentally changed IT. And when I kind of like, as a pretty deep practitioner myself, and like, I love to tinker stuff and then build software and all that stuff, I realized the massive impact it had. And beyond AWS, obviously AWS, like, good company, but the impact that it had on the industry is also really awesome, right? How many companies got started and were able to go to market really quickly and build amazing cutting edge stuff using the cloud provider? They didn't have to go and roll their own kernel to build a virtual machine on a physical data center somewhere, right? They just like go. And so it's that whole realization where I went like, oh, well, that's the thing that's missing from cybersecurity. Because today, if I want an EDR, I get to pick from like the 5 oligarchs of cybersecurity, and they all are going to try to sell me their 3-year bundle that, is going to be super complicated. And God forbid I want to build on top of that. Oh, no, that's a totally different thing. Like, so it was kind of all of that I was like, okay, that's the thing that's missing. It's almost not even like a fundamental technical thing. It's almost just a different view of cybersecurity capabilities. And sorry, yeah, I get sidetracked by that. That's the idea.
It's why we love having founders on, because the passion is just always, you can see, like, this is your baby, right? So yeah.
That's right. That's right.
So I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So 2025, obviously being in healthcare, I know 2025 is going to be challenging, right? We're in the beginning phases of, the older population, the last of the boomers are being retired. And then obviously the top of the boomers are kind of aging out, which is a nice way to say, moving on to the next plane of existence. So over the next couple of years, there's going to be plenty of challenges in the healthcare space regarding like budgeting and everything else. I'm already foreseeing a time where our business leadership is going to come to us at some point, and it's not necessarily going to be the question of, hey, I need you to do more with less. I think that we have good enough leadership that's smart enough to be able to, okay, how do we maintain and then adapt with like less funding? Knowing that, I foresee the day and age where, logging everything is going away, right? You're going to have to figure out what key elements you need to log. What do you need to keep local? What do you need to push to the cloud, right? Conversely, you're going to have to start seeing, EDR and logging solutions become more adaptive, because the days of the blank check, at least in healthcare, are over. What does your company do to help educate on what areas you can make changes, right, while still maintaining, say your threshold is 90%, right? Because there's no such thing as 100%. Your threshold was 90%. Obviously, budget and everything else, you're going to have to put it at 85%. So not a big drop. You can't really do more with less, but being realistic about being adaptive. What are some of the things that your company can do to help with that?
That's an interesting question. I think I'm going to sort of call out what I think is like the underlying assumption that you're making that I totally agree with, which is the idea that you're understanding your security posture, right? Like you're understanding the things you're putting forward, you're reasoning about like, hey, do we need that aspect that, this is how much it costs. How do we adapt that envelope that you're kind of managing? And I think it's super important because it implies that, hey, you guys are cybersecurity professionals. You know what you're doing. You understand how you're putting it forward, and there's no magic. That's kind of one of the big things that we try to promote is any vendor that comes to you and tries to, sell you black box magic. It's probably not. Look, those vendors have done great things for the industry, right? Like everybody needs an AV where, the hairdresser across the street, like they don't want to understand any of that stuff, right? Just like solve it. But over time, it's going to be less and less because it turns out cybersecurity is difficult and we need to reason about it and have the ability to really control how we put it forward, how we assemble it. And that is exactly where we come in, where we're truly built like a cloud provider, which means we're not coming in and saying like, hey, I have this magic EDR, XDR cloud-based blockchain bundle. And don't worry about how it works. I have a whole financing department to help you finance this. That's messed up. And like, here's the thing, right? We took the approach of, hey, we understand like how to do things in cybersecurity and in security operations. We're just going to make them drastically available to you. So you don't ever, we kind of want to be, I really like the comparison to a public utility, right? You start your company, like you start a bakery, you never have to go like, what kind of bundle can I negotiate with the power company? Like, no, they're there. Here's the rate. You pay it, go, right?
So we pay it or you don't get electricity.
That's right. That's right. And we kind of tried to take a little bit that same approach. We make it super accessible, and we make it very transparent. Like, we're not big fans in general of kind of the Gartner acronyms, not because they're not good, like they're necessary for the industry to put labels as we start to grow and think about things. But there's so many things that security operations need to do that don't neatly fit within one acronym. And if they do, it's just going to be done highly inefficiently. So we just say, like, here's all of the capabilities, all of the things that you might want to do. Hey, I want to alert on this type of thing, and I need to forward data and filter it down so it's cheaper to like this type of data like that I have, and I want to do all of that kind of stuff. We try to be very, very transparent. So you can use whatever you need, whenever you need it, at whatever scale you need it. And I think that's where I come from. Like, I think that is what promotes a mature cybersecurity industry that can be resilient to, hey, there's a downturn in the market, and we got to tighten the belt. That's okay, because we know exactly what we're protecting, how we're protecting it, right? We're not kind of like shackled by some vendor that decided to up their prices, and we don't exactly know how we're being protected.
So I saw on your website that some of the technologies are like SIM and EDR, which we've talked a little bit about. So when someone is a customer of yours, is this your own technology? Are you leveraging someone else's behind the scene? Talk a little bit about like that aspect of your business.
Yeah. So I've said it before. I say it like 100 times. Like, you look at it from a cloud provider perspective. So what I mean by that is EDR was our first product on the platform. I say EDR, it's really an agent, because we get people building XDR using us. We get all kinds of different types of usage of that agent, but much like EC2, there's some things in a cloud provider that are extremely core to what they can do, right? And the integration between, like, for example, that EC2 instance and other things is really, really primordial. Like, it's super important that it's made easy, because if you build Lego blocks, you kind of want to make sure that they go with each other. So EDR, we have our own technology. It's our own agent. It's cross-platform. Pretty much everything you can think of under the sun, we cover. But it doesn't mean that that's all we do, right? Like a cloud provider, the cloud provider are kind of designed to be very open to the world, right? Like, hey, you want your data from S3 to go to somewhere else. AWS, there's the pricing sometimes discussion, right? But like, AWS isn't going to say like, no, your data must be in S3. That's the only thing that exists in the world, and you can't go anywhere else. No, they'll just like, yeah, like, have access. So for us, it means that we integrate in a generic way with everything out there. I almost don't really care what your SIM is. You want to use your SIM because your analyst team loves your SIM and you're happy with it. Just, that's fine, right? Forward the data over like S3 or syslog or whatever you'd like, and it's all JSON, it's all documented, right? So we're kind of doing that dual mode side of things, where some things are just even open source, like Velociraptor, right? Excellent defer product. We just make Velociraptor easily accessible within Lima Charlie, and we're not rebranding it or doing anything like that. We just want to make stuff work for the teams out there.
So you could bring your own SIM. We used a couple of acronyms there: EDR, endpoint detection and response; XDR, I have no idea; extra detection and response. It's just people like that letter X. SIM, in the last episode I said what that was. I hate that acronym because I can never remember what it means. But so somebody could say bring their own. All the people that are really happy with their SIM out there, whoever that is, or you guys can offer that functionality yourself. Like, let's say I don't have one, or I don't like one that I'm using. You guys have the ability to do that function for a customer.
That's right. Like what we found is, so a couple of things. So EDR is kind of the perfect example. If you have your own EDR and you love it, you can bring it into Lima Charlie. Like connect it in, use it through everything. And a lot of people do that. The SIM example, what we found is SIM means something very different to almost everybody out there, right? For some people, SIM is Splunk. Like, hey, I can run a grep through my data. I'm happy with it. In which case, like, yeah, you can probably use Lima Charlie and be like perfectly happy with that. But some people, SIM means no. I have a really opinionated UI where my level 1 analysts get to like click on this button there to escalate the ticket to the next one, right? And that's where we go like, hey, look, we don't really do that. We don't have like a ticketing UI because we want to be this generic infrastructure for people to do cool stuff, and that's too opinionated. So we're just going to make it super, super easy to feed into that. Like really, really easily. And for you to test a different one, maybe in 6 months, you want to test a different one. You don't want to re-engineer your 600 different data sources, go into web app, like go in Lima Charlie or issue an API call and just say, you know what, send a fork of all my alerts from Defender from that tenant and into, this SIM for a week and see if I like it. If I don't, flush it. So that's the kind of flexibility that you get when you start to think about it, not as like, I have the, like, sorry, I was going to say somebody else's brand name, but like, like this like brand name SIM versus, no, I have the capabilities to do all of that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like it's an interesting space right now because I think a lot of people are trying to work that out in their head. Like, is what I need what I've thought of as SIM for the last 20 years, or is it something different now? I think there's some interesting technology that's out there as well. Certainly, I think things like data lakes and other things that were, kind of a mystical creature that we were never going to find are feasible now from a costing perspective type of thing. So yeah, a brave new world in the logging space, and I think a good opportunity for people to internally like re-architect, how they look at it and the types of things that they're going to do with it. So talk a little bit, I guess, about like I'm signing up with Lima Charlie. Is there a portal that I'm accessing? Like, what is the interaction? Like, if I'm an end user of the platform, what does that look like?
Yeah, totally. It's again a little bit like a cloud provider, right? Meaning, we have a UI, right? We have a web app, right? There's a free tier, Lima Charlie. You can create the tenant, 2 tenants for free with 2 sensors. So vast majority of all features are enabled. The web app, we kind of jokingly refer to it as the reference implementation of a UI, because 100% of it is based on public APIs. So we have some people that are in the web app like day in, day out, run their thing. We have some people that just see the web app once a year. They've just architected their product or their security operations, right? Maybe they're an MDR, and they just use the API to automate the creation of a tenant when they get a new customer. They send parts of the data to different spots, like and for them there's like no UI aspect of it. But the fundamental is like it's easy, right? Either you hop on the web app or you create an API key and get going. It's kind of it's the essence of what you think should be necessary.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and then I see. I also saw that there's some stuff around incident response, threat hunting, sort of thing. Is that something that you have a team of doing, or you are and helping the customer, or are you just providing better data to the customer in terms of being able to do that? Talk through what that looks like a little bit.
Yeah, and that's actually super important in my mind. So we call out these use cases because, right, we're kind of like that bucket of Lego blocks, right? And sometimes if the first time you see a bucket of Lego blocks, you go, I don't understand what any of this is. But if I put a TIE fighter together and I kind of show it to you, you go like, oh, got it, right?
Yeah.
So when we call out these use cases, that's exactly why we do that. But we are a infrastructure provider. And that is, in my opinion, so important because it means that if you're an IR person, right, and you get a call to do an IR, and you go and you deploy, from one of the major EDR vendors out there, they pretty much all do IR as well. So now you're kind of building their sales pipeline, quite honestly, because they also do MDR. And you better know that when their tools deploy and the IR is over, you want to go and convert them to an MDR. Well, that vendor is also going to try to do that. And so we didn't want to have this weird kind of confrontational relationship with anybody. We said, what we're good at is building infrastructure. And we want to do it in an OEM kind of fashion, meaning like a cloud provider, like you use what you want and you don't have to put our logo on whatever you do or anything like that. It's just there for you to use. So that's the big difference. Like we don't do MDR, we don't do IR, we don't do threat intel, we don't do any of those things, but we work with a bunch of people that do it and make their life better, or they resell some automation through the platform, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That makes sense to me. I get talk about what your typical customer looks like. I mean, I see like MSPs, this certainly seems like something that would be incredibly valuable for them, but from an enterprise or MSP, give us an idea of like what your target customer typically looks like.
For sure. The common thread is cybersecurity professionals, right? Meaning if you are, working in a smaller company and there's, two part-time IT people, like that's probably not the right fit. In the same way that AWS probably isn't really the right fit either, right?
Right.
Yeah. So we kind of look at it that way. So cybersecurity professionals that need to do this at a certain scale is often kind of part of that. And the types of customers that we get, we kind of, we have a focus right now, but we kind of really see the whole gamut. And so we have service providers, and that's the biggest segment that we work with right now, because they need to do it at scale. Margin are super important. They don't really care about the brand. They want to be effective. So that's a great mix. We also do have some enterprise. So we have like Snapshot's a customer, for example. So we've got some enterprise customers that are kind of tech forward. They have a decent security team. They want to have control over, their security posture or integrate with internal systems pretty often that no vendor could realistically know about. And then we have one of the segments that personally I'm most excited about is the builders, which is people that are building cybersecurity products, right? We kind of focus on, sometimes I joke, we're focused on the boring parts of cybersecurity, right? Like EDR, like got it, right? EDR has existed for like 10 years. Everybody knows what it is.
Yep.
And so we kind of enable people that have this great idea about this thing that they want to build to not have to go on day one and raise $5 million from a venture capital and then spend a year trying to build a team to, then only get to the same point as every other vendor out there. We want to tell them like, hey, pay as you go, just use that infrastructure and go do cool stuff. And so we have a bunch of people building products like that. One example is Blumira. So Blumira, like doing XDR stuff, super cool stuff. And we're just kind of like part of the piping in the background. just help them be awesomer.
Yeah, Blue Mira has been. They were way back when, but they have been a guest on our podcast and sponsored some of our events as well. So yes, we're very familiar with them. They've got very cool technology over there.
Absolutely.
So I'm like in my role as a pre-sales architect by day, podcaster by lunchtime. I'm big on like what the pre-sales process looks like when working with a vendor if I'm going to bring someone into one of my companies, but I'm also interested in the post-sales process and what that looks like in terms of how the company continues to interact with their customers moving forward. So tell us a little bit about how your pre-sales process works, but then also like what is being a customer of Lima Charlie like, not as after the PO is signed.
Absolutely. So because we have this free tier, and if you have a credit card, you can get whatever you want. It kind of changes the way that you look at the pre-sale side of things. It's not so much, hey, send an email. Within 2 weeks, you get a call from somebody that's going to vet whether you can access to the demo. If you're under 5,000 endpoints, they're not going to talk to you. And then a month later, you get the demo. And then you want to move to POC, you sign, a couple different documents, and then you get like none of this really exists with us. So it means that pre-sale is really it's kind of like you said, like the architecture side of thing. That's where we help people, right? People get in touch with us and they go like, hey, this sounds cool. Here's what we do. How would this play? And then we can just be like the subject matter experts and go like, well, if you take, this Lego block and that Lego block, and you could do this cool thing, and this is what pricing is going to look like. And, you can add this or drop that, or, however you want to use it. So that tends to be like the pre-sale side of thing. We do POCs. It's more from the perspective of putting like a really clean boundary. Like, honestly, I think it's more to help the people that want to evaluate us. Because if we just say like, oh, whenever, it's like, often they're like, my boss wants to know like the month that I'm going to be doing the POC. So like, okay, here's the month, here's the, here's a tenant, right? And then we just help you along. Like, hey, I'm trying to connect this thing, and like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Here's where we can help you.
Yeah.
So that's the pre-sale. The post-sale, it kind of similar. So we work with a lot with Slack channels. So we really like to, so many of the issues that you can hit during a POC are just really, really small. You just don't know necessarily if they're small. And so having a Slack channel where you're just able to go like, hey, I'm getting this error. Does it mean that? And then somebody, 5 minutes later goes like, oh yeah, this is what it means. Try to turn this thing on. And then cool. So we just keep extending that. Essentially, we work with the service providers, for example, that use us over a long period of time. The channel tends to slowly go very quiet, which is a great thing, because it means like, everybody's happy. There's no unknowns. Things are working well. But, when you need it, it's there.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I definitely like all of that. I like that. I definitely agree that from a POC perspective, you got to have some guardrails around what that looks like. I know from back when I always say back when I had a real job and I was a security person of doing POCs of products, like if it wasn't structured, you didn't really get to things, and then it dragged on forever. And so I think that having that structure is really, really important. And then certainly I think, again, the post-sales aspect is important. Most of the time when I see someone leaving one company to go to their competitor, it's not the technology, right? There's a lot of good technology out there across all these different security companies. Almost all the time it's a support and service kind of thing. Hey, we only see them when it's PO time. We only talk to those every, whatever. Their support isn't very good. Those are all the reasons why I typically see someone leaving one platform for another. So I have to ask, and I probably should have done this way back at the beginning of this episode, but Lima Charlie, where did the name originate from?
So there is sort of a dual origin story. One is like the official one is very simple. So I started my career in security and in intelligence sector, and so Lima Charlie is the NATO phonetic alphabet for L, and then C, which is kind of the short version for loud and clear. So during a radio transmission, it means I hear you loud enough, and there's no garbling on the line, like there's clean signal. The slightly unofficial version is um, very early on when I kind of started thinking about some of those components behind Lima Charlie. I was working out of the south of France, and I would go every morning in a cafe nearby. That was before like the laptops were kind of super common in a coffee shop. And so they were super nice to me to let me work there for hours in the morning. And they were called the Cafe LC. So when I kind of like thought of it, I was like, oh, okay, that's a nice nod.
Yeah. I love origin stories. I always say like the better the origin story, the better the story, right? And so that's why I love asking them. I mean, Batman's origin story is so good they put it in every single movie that they've ever done, right? And he's not even a superhero, but he's a superhero. So, well, good stuff. I learned something today, folks. I learned that turning 50 ain't all that bad. I mean, I did it personally a year and a half ago, but not another demo turning 50. Pretty good. I felt a youthful exuberance in this episode. And so, Maxime, we really appreciate you being a part of this and being part of our 50th episode. And I got to do the please like, subscribe, share, all of that stuff for the social medias. For everyone out there, please, smash that button or whatever the young kids say these days. And if you'd like to learn more about Lima Charlie, if you would like to bring your security operations into a more modern era, we've got all the details that you need down in the description of this episode. Get a hold of Maxime and he'll tell you all about it. So again, Maxime, thanks. We appreciate it. And everyone else, we'll see you for episode 51.